at Sandy Hook Elementary School, where 20 children and 6 adults were slaughtered in December of 2010. And Sarah founded the Newtown Action Alliance, an organization dedicated to the reduction of gun violence. And she's been featured in Yahoo News, USA Today, and the Huffington Post for her efforts to educate youth and adults about the need to decrease the violence in the world. So if you can join me in welcoming Sarah, I would really appreciate it to the stage. Those of you that have been to PCM before know we like to throw up our I love you as a sign of support, of strength, that we're there with you. And so hopefully Sarah, as she's telling us a little bit about her story and her movement and her passion, sees a lot of these up in the air to let her know that everybody in this room is with her and loves her today. So we really appreciate it. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to PCM Southeast for inviting me here to speak with you all. It's really such an honor, and I can't wait to share my story and spend the rest of the day with you all. I think there's really something incredible about young people coming together for peace and change like this, and it feels a little weird to me to stand up here and say that, because a year ago, I would not have imagined I would be. A year ago, I was a junior at Newtown High School. I was attempting to get my license. I was just starting to think about college, and I was fairly active at school. A year ago, I would say I was a bit sheltered, not by my parents or myself or anyone in particular, simply by my story. I was born in Dallas, Texas, to a middle-class family. We moved to Newtown, Connecticut when I was going into 3rd grade because it was safer and had better schools, a statement that seems less than settling now. I wanted to go into filmmaking a year ago. I wanted to help tell other people's stories, and then 5 months later, I was listening to a young man, Colin Goddard, speak to me, my parents, and members of my community about stories. Colin was shot multiple times at Virginia Tech and was now looking me directly in the eyes and saying, "Don't let anyone tell you that your story does not matter. Your story does matter. In fact, your story is the most important thing that you have. I don't want to go into film anymore, but I'm still telling my story, and my goals for the future are still about helping others tell their stories." I was very closely affected by the events of December 14th, 2012. My mother is a teacher at Sandy Hook Elementary School, and we knew many of those who were lost. On that day, as soon as I got home, I opened a new document on Word and titled it 12-14-12 Remember. Looking back, I have no idea what motivated me to do so, or how I knew deep down that this day would change the rest of my life. And since then, for the last 10 months, I've added memories, emotions, and pieces of writing that have anything to do with that day. My story is in that document. And one of the first points that I wrote on it said that I really hoped that that day would not define me for the rest of my life. But I've learned something. I learned that this awful tragedy and painful event does not define me. It simply becomes part of my story. Where you start and what happens to you does not determine who you will become in the future. Looking back to before 12-14, I often feel the urge to kick myself. I feel that I was sheltered, ignorant of the facts about American gun violence that ravaged this nation. I never thought it would happen to me in Newtown, where we have a safe community and incredible schools. I remember one day going upstairs to my dad's office as an 11-year-old. My dad was reading an article about the Virginia Tech shooting. I vividly remember the number 32. And I asked him why it happened, but he didn't have an answer. I also remember last summer when I was at a camp and I heard reports of the Aurora shooting. I was broken inside and called my mom, homesick and missing her even more than before. I remember in the weeks following, we cried often for those families. But we were so thankful that it wasn't us, that it wasn't our theater or our town. And looking back, that seems terribly horrifying to me, because less than 6 months later, it happened to us. Let me tell you my mom's story. On December 14th, 2012, my mom, a 2nd grade teacher at Sandy Hook Elementary School, thought the first shots of an assault rifle in her school were folding chairs falling, because the winter concert was being put on soon. But when she saw the janitor sprint by, she saved 2 kids by pulling them into her classroom as they were taking the attendance down to the main office. The intercom was turned on to warn the school, but because of this, everyone heard every single shot loud and clear. My mother read her class books and sang Christmas songs before they got out. That's my mom's story. I was in physics class at the high school. I had to wait an hour before I knew that my mom was alive. I had to wait another hour before I could speak to her on the phone. I knew some of the teachers and students lost, and my mom has to go into work every day now, knowing she should have at least 5 more kids in her class. She is only 15 this year, as opposed to the typical 20. So that's our story. Looking back at that day and the days following, I can't really remember many specifics. Everything is blurred and fogged over, and only snippets of memories come to surface at times. But I do remember that one of the first thoughts that crossed my mind that night, after my family was safe at home, something 26 families could not say, was that I needed to do something to change things. So many millions of people around the world felt helpless and performed acts of kindness for my town and sent over 10,000 teddy bears to us in the weeks that followed. But even Newtowners felt helpless and wanted to do something. I've attempted over the past 10 months to transform my pain into positive action. The first step I took was traveling down to Washington, D.C. I marched with my father and 6,000 other Americans who wanted to see a change in gun legislation. Shortly after, I joined the Newtown Action Alliance and then formed the student branch, the Junior Newtown Action Alliance, to give young people the opportunity to be a part of this debate. Like I said before, I would never have expected to most look forward to youth activism in my life. If you look at any profound social movement ever, young people always have a strong hand in justice that is made. From the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee during the Civil Rights Movement, to the young people who are leading the charge for LGBT rights today. Young people have a special way of seeing clearly the path to justice without being blinded by polarizing sides and redundant rhetoric. We hear so many adults shoving back and forth at each other, getting nowhere. Young people are powerful and courageous. When I travel to Washington, D.C., I meet with legislators about gun reform. I bring other young people, and last time that included students from Newtown and students from inner city areas. Students who do that, who take off of school and travel to Washington, D.C. to speak to adults they've never met before, to tell their heartbreaking stories and realities, break the stereotype that our generation is lazy and careless. These students show more strength, kindness, and courage in 2 days of nonstop advocacy than many individuals show in their lifetime. Adults have this idea sometimes, and I get this all the time, that I am young and naive and that I'll never learn, and that I'll learn when I grow up. But here's the thing, I've gone through more than many people have. Our stories are who we are and can lead the path to how we act in the future. Age does not matter. Your story, your motives, and your humanity are what matter. And if you lead with a kind heart and a clear mind and a determined attitude, you can accomplish more than your age might portray. By 2020, our generation will make up about 40% of the voting population in America. Yet at the same time, we are the generation most disproportionately affected by gun violence. In fact, gun violence is the leading cause of death for Black males in our generation, and it's the second leading cause of death for our generation as a whole. This is one reason why youth advocacy is so important, and it goes beyond the issue of gun violence, but it's no doubt a fantastic example. Elected officials or their staffers behave and react differently when a student comes to speak to them. They're not only inspired by our strength to relive our stories over and over again in each meeting, but they are more open-minded and interested in pursuing dialogue with us. They get that it takes a lot to take a stand. So many young people are afraid of politics and politicians, as they only see them as the talking heads on television, or they only hear terrible things that they've said or done. But in reality, there are so many dozens of great legislators who will support your cause. Their job is to meet with you, to make time for their constituents, and if they're good elected officials, they will base their actions in Washington, D.C. on what you have to say. Do not be afraid to get involved politically, because not only do we as young people feel the brunt of almost all political action or inaction, but we also have a huge voice as the future of the nation and as future voters. Another point I will make about youth activism is the importance of pushing for diversity and understanding. Like I said before, Newtown is sheltered. While we were in our own bubble, students our age in Newark, New Jersey, or New Orleans, or the neighboring Danbury, Connecticut, struggled every day with unconscionable fear and pushed through with indescribable resilience due to day-to-day gun violence. While we celebrated our Sweet 16s with big parties and gifts, an advocate told me that students she knows in bad neighborhoods in Chicago celebrated their 16th birthdays because they'd made it that far. It is no secret that mass shootings that occur in wealthier, wider areas tend to get the most media coverage and garner the most intense reaction from America. The majority of gun violence in the U.S. occurs in inner city areas, though, and by coming together, we show that our differences do not segregate our hopes and goals for the future. For the first time ever, we have one strong and collective push from Americans of all different backgrounds, with all different stories. For those of us directly or indirectly, for that matter, affected by gun violence, emotion may have brought us to this point, but logic, facts, and common sense keep us here, and that goes for any cause. The final point that I'll make, that is likely the most important lesson that I've learned in the last 10 months of being an activist, is how to deal with pushback and negativity. I have 2 stories for you that have to do with this. The first is about legislative frustration. The Universal Background Checks bill for firearms, brought up in April, was the first piece of legislation that I had worked on since 1214. I was in France on a student delegation trip when the bill failed. And I remember getting the notification on my iPod. I was completely shattered inside, and I was sure this would be the end of my activism. But then I was looped into some emails from gun violence prevention leaders, and I remember the first one said, "From a man who has been working on this issue for longer than I've been alive. It happened. The bill failed. Let's move forward with this." And at first I was slightly angry. How could someone who's been working on this issue for decades be so unfazed? But then I rethought that question. How are these people, some of whom lost loved ones to senseless gun violence themselves, have such incredible strength, resolve, optimism, and resilience in such an upsetting defeat? They picked back up, acknowledging that something happened, but also acknowledging that it wouldn't take them down. Seeing the emails and later hearing the advocates in person made me realize that this defeat may have changed me for the better in the long run, and it no doubt taught me a lesson about the true meaning of strength. After the bill failed, I also learned that it's really so hard to get something done in Washington. But the courage of these people I've worked with from Newtown and other groups is something I've never seen before. They got up that day, hours after the vote, and were ready to take the failure not necessarily as a loss, but as a part of our story that we will carry with us as we move forward. I learned a great lesson from that defeat, and it proved to me that the incredible will of those around you can motivate you to do so much, to keep pushing until you see the better, safer future that you're working towards come to full fruition. When you're passionate about something, you become unafraid, and that is when you can get things done. My second story is about opposition. At the 6-month anniversary of the shooting in my town, I built up lots of courage inside and decided to participate in a fantastic CNN.com article. I was so proud of how it turned out, but then I made the mistake of reading comments that people made on the article. One of them was so cruel about me that I completely shut down. I didn't know what to do or how to push forward, so I emailed a question to a friend of mine who goes on television and radio all the time, who deals with that stuff every day. She said, "People are scared of change, so sometimes it's easier for them to lash out at someone than to take a look inward at themselves and think about if what they're doing is the best thing that they can be doing." Those comments sting for a second, but I have to remind myself that the only reason they were motivated to contact me and say that was because I said something that hit home for them, or that made them uncomfortable. It's a small step, but maybe it can be a small step towards change. These comments, the backlash from crazy people who want to demean others, are a hard part of our work, of any cause's work. People will always want to pull you down for whatever reason, and there's nothing you can do about them. They don't matter. What matters is that you do what you have to do, and you can even use them to motivate you to do better. It takes a very strong person to do what everyone in this room is doing. Simply by showing up to Peace Jam, by being involved, by standing up for something that you believe in, you prove that you're just as strong as myself, or my friend who goes on television all the time, or the people who fight for change in our government. Gun violence prevention is one issue, but this applies to all causes. What you do, what you strive for, is not a sprint, it's a marathon, and we're all on the same team. Sometimes there will be bumps in the path, and we'll fall. But we have to be there to brush each other off, and then keep running. We can make our future better, and I look forward to doing it together with you all. Stay Newtown strong, and love will win. It always does.
What a brave young woman. We're so happy that you're here.